Santa Clara is not handing out participation trophies. This front office is building a roster ready for war. And today, it starts right where 49ers football usually starts, in the trenches, with a national champion trying to steal a spot most people think is already decided. Then we get into a possible veteran move that brings both pride and warning signs. Then the Brandon Aiyuk situation gets even messier. And of course, George Kittle answers injury talk in the most George Kittle way possible. Subscribe right now because soft conversation does not explain a contender. This is 49ers football. Pressure, accountability, and teeth clenched. Mikail Kamara is exactly the kind of name people brush off in May, then pretend they saw coming in August. Undrafted free agent, yes. But if you think that automatically throws him to the bottom of the conversation, you have not been watching the right 49ers team. This franchise has made a living finding value where the league stops looking. And after what happened last season, this defensive line cannot walk into 2026 leaning only on faith, reputation, and hoping everybody stays healthy. Doug Farrar from SB Nation listed Kamara among 9 undrafted free agents with a real shot to make Week 1 rosters. And that choice makes sense because it attacks a serious San Francisco need. Aggressive pass rush depth. A healthy Nick Bosa changes the whole defense. A healthy Michael Williams does too. Romello Height arrives as a third-round pick. Keon White and Sam Okuayinonu feel like more stable edge pieces. Inside, Osa Odigizua, Alfred Collins, CJ West, and Grayson Halton look like the first group. But after that door is not shut. It is wide open for somebody tough enough to kick it down. And Kamara has real ammunition for that fight. Last season at Indiana, he finished with 2 sacks and 59 pressures on 340 pass rush snaps. If you only see the 2 sacks and shrug, you are missing the whole picture. Pressure changes everything. Pressure makes quarterbacks rush. Pressure creates interceptions for somebody else, draws holding calls, and turns third downs ugly fast. And if the concern is finishing, go back to 2024, when he had 10 quarterback takedowns. So no, this is not just some random camp body. This is a defender with production, volume, and real ability to bother people. Now this is the part that matters most to me. Chris Kocurek. If there is a defensive line coach who can take a player with versatility, some power reps, and experience across different alignments, it is him. Kamara has played in more than one scheme, at 2 schools, with his hand in the dirt, from a 2-point stance, and from a 3-point stance. That matters because the final roster spot usually does not go to the cleanest player on paper. It goes to the guy who solves the most problems. Can he line up outside? Can he reduce inside? Can he handle dirty snaps? Can he play special teams? Can he make one loud preseason play against backups? If the answer is yes, suddenly he becomes hard to cut. And this is where I am going to be direct. Cameron Sample, James Thompson, and every other name in that battle should not feel comfortable. Kamara even covered punts in the national championship game. For a bigger defender, that screams willingness. And on a contender's roster, willingness plus usefulness becomes real currency. He does not need to become a star in July. He needs to show up. He needs to flash on 2 or 3 plays. He needs to make a coach rewind the tape and say, "This guy can survive on our Sunday roster." If that happens, do not act shocked later. The spot is there. Kamara just has to take it. And then Cameron Jordan shows up smiling next to Raheem Morris, and just like that, fans start building the scenario in their heads. I understand it. The 49ers need pass rush. They need leadership. They need a grown man in the room for a defensive line that is very young in some spots. But I am going to say this with no breaks. If this conversation turns into an excuse to tear down Nick Bosa, then it already started wrong. Cameron Jordan is an interesting possibility because of what he still represents, not because anyone needs to pretend Bosa is no longer the gravitational force of this defense. Jordan will be 37 when the season starts. That is not small. That is a huge red light flashing on the dashboard. But there is another side of this, and it deserves respect too. The guy almost never misses games. He is still productive, and last season he put up 10.5 sacks and 30 pressures. For any player at that age, that is not just pretty nice. That is ridiculously competitive. So the question is not whether Cameron Jordan still has a recognizable name. He does. The real question is whether San Francisco sees a specific, controlled, aggressive, useful role for him. You cannot sign a veteran like that and expect him to be the engine he was in 2017. But you also cannot look at a defense with Osa Odigizua, Alfred Collins, CJ West, Grayson Halton, Romello Height, Michael Williams, and other young pieces and act like leadership means nothing. It matters. It matters a lot. Especially when the schedule gets tight, when opposing offenses adjust, when one third down decides whether you get off the field or take 7 right in the mouth. And here is what really grabs me. The 49ers cannot be romantic, but they also cannot be arrogant. If Jordan is cheap, if the market is cold because of his age, and if he accepts a realistic role, why not make the call? Why not put a battle-tested veteran inside a group that needs to turn potential into fear? This defense does not need pretty speeches. It needs players who know how to win reps, study tackles, talk on the sideline, raise the practice standard, and not blink when the game hits the fourth quarter. Bringing in Cameron Jordan would not be admitting weakness, it would be admitting ambition. Real contenders do not wait for depth to catch fire before looking for water. They buy insurance early. They see problems before those problems explode. They force competition. If Jordan still has fuel left for 2026, San Francisco has a responsibility to at least look seriously. But with one condition. He comes in to add to the 49ers' plan, not to become cheap ammunition against Bosa. This defense needs more teeth, not lazy narratives. Now let's get to Brandon Aiyuk, because some people are trying to turn a contract and roster strategy battle into a moral drama against the 49ers. And I am not buying the easy version. Calling San Francisco's approach a petty circus might get clicks. It might feed anger. It might light up social media. But this franchise does not exist to make life easier for one player while it is still trying to protect its own roster, its own locker room, and its own season. Aiyuk is still under contract. That is the hard reality of the story. If the 49ers have not cut ties yet, it could be because of finances, because they are trying to keep leverage, because of roster timing, because of medical evaluation, because the market is cold, or because of internal strategy. Can you criticize the delay? Of course. Can you say this has gotten ugly, heavy, and exhausting? Absolutely. But turning that instantly into personal sabotage skips way too many steps. A team trying to win a Super Bowl does not make decisions just to look clean on debate shows. Matt Mayoko's comments on KNBR poured gasoline on the story because he brought up a simple, uncomfortable path. If Aiyuk wants to force the franchise's hand, he could show up in Santa Clara, walk into the building, and act like someone ready to participate in OTAs. He is still on the team. And Mayoko got straight to the point. The 49ers probably do not want Aiyuk around the players who are there building the next version of the offense. That creates questions for Kyle Shanahan, for John Lynch, for the locker room, for everybody. It would be a living distraction walking through the facility. But this is where the analysis has to stop being naive. San Francisco has dealt with public awkwardness before. In 2022, while trying to trade Jimmy Garoppolo and transition to Trey Lance, the team practiced on one field while Jimmy worked separately on another. Was it strange? Yes. Did it destroy the franchise? No. So the idea that Aiyuk showing up would automatically force a same-day release might be too strong. The difference is that Garoppolo and the team still had a working relationship. With Aiyuk, the vibe feels a lot more combustible. And that is why I want to hear from the Niners war room in the comments. Should the franchise cut this problem loose now, or hold on until it squeezes out as much value as possible? Because I will defend the shield, but defending the shield also means demanding smart toughness. If Aiyuk shows up, he can turn the heat way up. If he does not, the standoff continues. But one thing does not change. The 49ers cannot let one contract become the emotional center of the offseason. The priority is Brock Purdy. It is the timing of the offense. It is a clean locker room. It is a contender breathing without unnecessary noise. If the split is inevitable, then do it with force, not panic. And we close the 4 stories with George Kittle, because when Kittle enters any conversation about injury, timeline, and an international game, the fanbase's heart rate jumps immediately. The hope is to see him on the field in Week 1 against the Rams in Australia. That is a huge stage, a different kind of game, and a rare chance for one of the NFL's most recognizable stars to carry the red and gold into a global spotlight. But there is one word nobody in Santa Clara can treat like a minor detail: Achilles. Nick Wagner from ESPN brought the read that expecting Kittle back in Week 1 might be too optimistic, and that a return in Weeks 2, 3, or 4, once the team is back home in Santa Clara, feels more realistic. The original post also got it wrong by saying ACL instead of Achilles, and Kittle responded on social media in classic Kittle fashion saying, "I don't remember that happening." It was light, it was funny, but underneath the joke there is real tension. Because the 49ers know this injury movie better than they ever wanted to. Fans laugh for 2 seconds and then immediately think, please, do not add more pain to this team. Kittle seems motivated. Nobody is debating that. He is one of those players who does not treat football like a normal job. He plays like every snap is a personal fight against fatigue, against the defender, against the limits of his own body. And yes, he even told that story about saving Claire from a spider, which the internet quickly connected to Australia and all the imagery that comes with it. With Kittle, even that becomes a signal, a joke, and fuel for the story. But Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch cannot make this decision based on willpower, charisma, or a cool moment. If he is 100%, great. Unleash the monster. The offense changes when Kittle is on the field because he blocks like a lineman, threatens like a receiver, and injects ridiculous energy into the sideline. But if there is any shadow of risk, any physical compensation, any chance that he protects the Achilles and overloads another part of his body, then the 49ers need to be cold. That is not cowardice. That is contender intelligence. You cannot put an entire season on the table for one game, no matter how historic that game feels. The truth is harsh. San Francisco needs Kittle in January more than it needs him in a September headline. Of course it would hurt to open against the Rams in Australia without him. Of course the NFL loses a star, the offense loses personality, and the fan base loses that emotional spark. But if the choice is between rushing him and protecting him, I choose protection every time without apologizing. Because defending the 49ers also means protecting their warriors when they want to run before it is time. Kittle is going to fight to come back. The team has to make sure that fight does not become a trap. In the end, today's message is simple and heavy. The 49ers do not have a quiet offseason because they do not have small ambitions. Kamara is trying to kick down the final roster door. Cameron Jordan represents that uncomfortable question about experience, age, and pass rush. Aiyuk has become a test of the franchise's backbone. Kittle reminds us that courage without caution can cost way too much. Santa Clara has to be aggressive, but it also has to be precise. Because contenders do not win with speeches. They win by fixing details before those details become disasters. If you want to follow this battle up close, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and stay with us.